Something happened in Cleveland yesterday that had nothing to do with a single throw or a depth chart update or any competitive rep on a practice field. Deshaun Watson walked past the assembled media and said absolutely nothing. No explanation, no deflection, no rehearsed non-answer built to satisfy the question without actually answering it. He was there and then he was gone, and the space where his words should have been was filled with something louder than most people are giving it credit for. I want to start there because I think that moment is the key to understanding exactly where this quarterback competition stands right now and where it is unambiguously heading. Here is what I know about how NFL environments actually function when a live evaluation is in progress. Every interaction inside that facility is being observed. Not casually, not peripherally, but with the specific intentional attention of a coaching staff whose entire professional responsibility in this moment is forming accurate judgments about the two human beings competing for the most important position on the roster. In that context, the decision to step away from a moment rather than meet it directly is not a neutral act. It is a competitive statement. Watson told that building something yesterday without a single word leaving his mouth, and the people whose job it is to evaluate exactly these kinds of behavioral signals receive that message with complete clarity. You cannot walk away from an evaluation moment and expect the people doing the evaluating to simply file it away as meaningless. They do not. They never do. What Shedeur Sanders is doing inside that same building every single day is worth describing with real precision because the contrast here is not subtle or manufactured. The consistent accounts coming out of that facility describe a quarterback who treats every available hour of the preparation window as genuinely consequential, not because someone is watching, but because that is his actual relationship with this opportunity. He is not performing urgency for an audience and then shifting into a different gear when the cameras leave. He is locked in, fully and continuously, in the way that coaching staffs recognize immediately because they have spent entire careers learning to distinguish performed preparation from the real thing. In a competition where the physical evaluation alone cannot cleanly separate two players, the competitor who embraces every uncomfortable moment of the process, rather than managing his distance from it, carries a real and accumulating advantage. One player in Cleveland is leaning into this competition with everything he has. The other exited without a word. The coaches see both of those things, and they are drawing exactly the conclusions those behaviors warrant. Let me take you into the receiver additions now, because I think this is the part of the Cleveland picture that most of the public conversation has moved past too quickly. When Todd Monken spoke about Denzel Boston, the specific language he reached for tells you something important that generic roster analysis tends to miss. He talked about size, about matchup difficulty, about red zone presence. He talked about a player who loves to compete and whose improvement trajectory has been consistent over time. Those are not words that coaches produce when they are describing a player added without a clear architectural vision for how he fits. That is an offensive mind, and Monken's identity was built entirely around coordinating high-level offenses before this head coaching position, describing a specific kind of target that has been designed for a specific kind of quarterback operation. Every word in that description is pointing at something. A physically imposing receiver who creates genuine alignment problems in the red zone, who forces defensive coordinators to allocate safety attention in ways that open coverage elsewhere in the formation, requires a very particular type of quarterback to weaponize effectively. He requires a quarterback who identifies the coverage advantage that the receiver's presence has created, processes where the ball needs to go before the defense can rotate to eliminate the window, and delivers on schedule rather than waiting for a more obvious answer to emerge after the design structure has already expired. That is not a style that accommodates improvisation as its baseline operating mode. It is a timing-based operation, fundamentally, and it demands a quarterback whose internal processing clock is synchronized with the route structure, rather than one who uses the route structure as a loose starting point before his own physical instincts take over. Shedeur Sanders fits that description in a way that is specific and traceable through his entire competitive history. He processes quickly. He reads coverage with the decisiveness that comes from genuine system mastery rather than surface familiarity. He commits to throws before the window has fully resolved, which means the ball is confirming a decision that was already made rather than discovering the answer in real time. That is the operational style that unlocks what Boston can do as a red zone target, and it is the style that every piece of Monken's public language around this offense has been consistently describing. Not by accident, by design. Watson's orientation runs in a fundamentally different direction. Even in the years before injuries complicated everything about his situation, his natural instinct when the designed play structure did not produce an immediate and clear answer was to extend the play using his physical gifts and improvise a solution from outside the structure. That produced individual moments of genuine brilliance, that very few quarterbacks in the history of the position could have replicated. It also produced a specific kind of systematic inconsistency: the penalties that come when extended plays collapse under pressure, the turnovers that come when improvised throws into contested coverage do not land where the off-route receiver anticipated, and the week-to-week identity volatility that makes it genuinely difficult to build the kind of execution-based consistency that a head coach defined by winning, rather than just scoring, is trying to establish as the operational standard. Monken did not come to Cleveland to build an improvisation system. He came to build a rhythm-based timing offense, and the quarterback most capable of executing that offense is increasingly obvious to anyone examining the evidence without the filter of narrative preference. Casey Concepcion adds another layer to this architectural picture that I think deserves careful attention rather than a passing mention. A quick, technically precise route runner who creates consistent separation on short and intermediate concepts, the exact receiver profile that becomes genuinely dangerous in a system where the quarterback processes quickly and commits to throws on timing rather than holding the ball through an extended development window. You do not add two receivers with these specific and directly complementary profiles in the same offseason by accident. Conception creates underneath and intermediate opportunities that pull coverage resources out of position in ways that make Boston's red zone matchups available on the back end. Both receivers require a quarterback who processes the whole formation quickly, trusts the routing concepts completely, and releases with the timing and ball placement those routes were specifically designed around. The architectural logic of every acquisition this offseason points toward the same conclusion. Monken has been assembling this deliberately, and the quarterback at the center of what he's assembling is not difficult to identify when you look at the full picture honestly. The developmental philosophy that Monken has articulated publicly adds another dimension to this, and I want to be specific about what he actually said rather than summarizing it in a way that loses the important detail. He was direct about what coaching staffs fundamentally owe the players inside their building. The job is to develop each player toward the genuine ceiling of their capability, to push them toward what they can actually become, rather than simply managing what they currently are and extracting whatever performance is available in the immediate term. That is not a casual statement. It is a professional orientation commitment, and when you place it inside the live context of this competition, it reveals something specific about where this coaching staff's genuine investment is being directed. Watson, at this point in his career, is not a developmental project by any honest assessment. He is a completed professional product, a quarterback whose habits and tendencies and mechanical patterns were formed across a decade of professional experience and thousands of professional repetitions, and those things are not going to be substantially reshaped by a new coaching environment, however talented and motivated that staff is. What Watson provides is operational competence. The ability to run a professional offense at a functional level without requiring the foundational teaching investment that a young quarterback needs. What he cannot provide is the thing Monken was actually describing, which is a player whose ceiling remains genuinely open, who is still actively becoming the complete version of what his ability supports, who can be shaped through real coaching investment into something meaningfully greater than his current form. Shedeur Sanders is that player in every relevant sense. He is young enough, talented enough, and intellectually equipped enough to absorb a new professional system at a pace that exceeds what his raw experience level would predict. A coaching staff that defines its professional identity around player development is not making that statement with Watson in mind when they say it. They are describing their relationship with a quarterback who is still being built, and the commitment required to build him correctly only happens when the people doing the building have genuinely decided who they are building around. The offensive line situation is something Monken addressed with an honesty that is itself informative about how this organization operates. He acknowledged openly that the center position remains an active question rather than a resolved one. A coaching staff willing to publicly name the gaps in their roster is a staff building toward a long-term vision rather than papering over present vulnerabilities with confident public language. In that context, which quarterback actually fits this specific situation right now becomes a consequential question that I do not think the broader conversation is examining with enough precision. Interior penetration creates a very specific kind of disruption for quarterbacks. It arrives from the direction they are already facing, which means it collapses the timing of the weight transfer and delivery before the passer has the visual or positional information to respond to it, the way he might respond to edge pressure that develops from his peripheral vision. A quarterback who releases on timing is structurally better equipped behind an interior line with uncertainty than one whose model requires extended pocket time for either the designed play to develop fully or for improvised solutions to emerge after the design is broken down. Watson's tendency to hold the football and extend plays actually amplifies exposure behind an imperfect interior line, rather than compensating for it, because the extension creates additional time for interior penetration to close, rather than reducing it. Shedeur's processing speed means the ball is frequently gone before interior pressure can disrupt the pocket in the first place. That is not a marginal advantage in a specific situation where the center position is still being actively addressed. It is a structural competitive advantage that accumulates across hundreds of snaps across a full season in ways that show up in outcomes even when they are invisible on any individual play. Monken drew a distinction in one of his most recent public conversations that I think contains more strategic information than most people extracted from it. As an offensive coordinator, he said, the job is to score points. As a head coach, the job is to win football games. He made that distinction deliberately, and I do not think he made it without understanding exactly what it communicates about his philosophical orientation. Scoring produces numbers in individual games and generates the highlight content that drives the public conversation. Winning requires something more demanding, more consistent, and less immediately visible, which is disciplined situational decision-making across a full season. The commitment to protecting the football when protecting it matters more than manufacturing a spectacular moment. The judgment to choose the right decision over the impressive one when those two options diverge, and the systematic execution that allows a team to be genuinely competitive across 17 weeks, rather than brilliant and chaotic in unpredictable alternation. That is a philosophy that demands a quarterback who operates within the structure he's been given, who makes the correct decision rather than the highlight decision, who understands at a functional level that consistency across an entire season produces more wins than the individual moments that everybody talks about on Monday morning but do not consistently determine what happens in the final score on Sunday afternoon. I want to be honest and fair about Watson here, because I think the analysis requires it, and I think it is possible to be accurate about the current situation without being dismissive of what he was capable of being at his genuine peak. Even in those years, his primary operating principle was never systematic discipline within structure. He was a creator, a playmaker, a quarterback whose individual moments of brilliance were genuinely irreproducible by most other players in the league on those same specific plays. That is a legitimate and valuable form of football excellence. It is simply not the form of excellence that Monken described when he articulated his philosophy, and it is not the form that the offense being constructed in Cleveland has been specifically designed to deploy. The commitment to winning over scoring is a commitment to a different quarterback identity, one built around processed decisions and trusted timing and the disciplined execution of designed structures rather than the improvised solutions that emerge when those structures break down. Shedeur Sanders inhabits that identity in his operational framework more completely and more naturally than Watson has ever operated within it, and that gap matters in this specific context. Every thread I pull on when I look at this situation leads to the same place. The receiver acquisitions point toward it. The developmental philosophy points toward it. The head coach's stated distinction between scoring and winning points toward it. The daily competitive behavior of the two quarterbacks inside that building points toward it. And Watson's decision to say nothing yesterday, to walk past the moment rather than step into it, points toward it most clearly of all. These are not separate data points that can be explained away individually when they are isolated from their context. They are a coherent pattern, and patterns in professional football evaluation accumulate across time in ways that reveal the underlying reality rather than the managed presentation of it. Watson's silence removed the possibility that his experience at managing competitive appearances through strategically timed public moments could obscure what the full picture of this competition is actually showing. Shedeur Sanders did not need that to happen in order to make his case. He was already making it every single day through the consistency of his work and his engagement and his refusal to manage his distance from any part of this process. The people evaluating both of these quarterbacks see all of it clearly. The formal announcement is all that remains.